session to His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who is the founder Acharya of ISKCON. Now we like to pay my obeisances to His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj and His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. So today we will be starting with a new chapter, part of Gyan Yoga section, which is chapter 13, titled as Nature, Enjoyer and the Consciousness. So we all know that we have divided Bhagavad Gita in 3 parts. First part was Karma Yoga, second part was Bhakti Yoga, and this is the Gyan Yoga section of Bhagavad Gita, which has 6 chapters. So the title of these chapters are, 13th chapter is Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. Back. Having 35 verses. The chapter 14 is the 3 modes of material nature, having 27 verses. 15th chapter is Yoga of the Supreme Person, Purushottam Yoga, 20 verses. 16th chapter, Divine and the Demonic Nature, 24 verses. 17th chapter is Divisions of the Faith, 28 verses. And the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita is Conclusion, which is the Perfection of Renunciation, which is the longest chapter, having 78 verses. So we will start with the 13th chapter, titled as The Nature, Enjoyer and Consciousness. It is further divided into 6 sections. So we will cover the first 2 sections today. Verse number 1, in which there are Arjuna's 6 questions, and from 2 to 7 are Krishna answers 3 questions out of that. That is, what is Kshetra, what is Kshetragya, and what is Jnana. And from 8 to 12, there is detailed description of Jnana. That is the process of acquiring this knowledge. From 13 to 19 is Geyam. Geyam is the object of knowledge. And the 20 to 26 verses talks about Prakriti, Purusha and their union, which are the other 2 questions. So this way we cover 6 questions asked by Arjuna. And the last section of this chapter, 27 to 35, is Jnana Chakshu, the vision of knowledge, which describes that a person who develops a vision to see this knowledge in proper perspective. So what is the vision of that person who has developed that vision to see this knowledge? So we will start with the first verse, Arjuna's 6 questions. Next. And Krishna describes about Kshetra, Kshetragya and Jnana. So anybody would like to recite these 2 verses?
I will recite, Mataji.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. Arjuna uvacha prakrutim purusham chaiva kshetram kshetrajnam evacha etadveditam ichchami jnanam jneyam cha keshava. Sri Bhagavan uvacha idam shariram kaunteya kshetram yityabhidhiyate etadyo veti tam prahu kshetrajna iti taha. I'm hearing a lot of echo. Is everybody facing the same issue?
Yes, Prabhuji, there is some echo.
Okay, I've now muted Radhika ji, so maybe you can recite now.
Arjuna uvacha prakrutim purusham chaiva kshetram kshetrajnam evacha etadveditam ichchami jnanam jneyam cha keshava. Sri Bhagavan uvacha idam shariram kaunteya kshetram ityabhidhiyate etadyo veti tam prahu kshetrajna iti tadvidaha. Arjuna said, "O my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field, and the knower of the field, and of knowledge, and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, as we know, the title of this chapter is Nature, Enjoyer and Consciousness. So, actually, this chapter talks about these three things. What is nature? Nature is this material world, okay, this material nature, and body is also included in that. And who is the enjoyer? We all know that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. Bhoktaranya Kitapsam Sarvalok Maheshwara. And who is the what is about consciousness? Consciousness is used for Jiva. So actually there are 6 questions, but in totality there are only 3 because they talk about Jeev, Jagat and Jagadish. These 3. Okay, and what is their differences between a soul and super soul and how they are related with this material nature. So this chapter is all about this Gyan of soul, super soul and material nature. That's why it is a part of Gyan Yoga section of Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna's 6 questions in this shloka, as we can see, is related to Prakriti, what is like material nature, then Purusha, who is the enjoyer of this material nature, and Kshetra, the field in which one can act in the material world, Kshetragya, the knower of that field, Jnanam, knowledge in the process of knowing, and Geyam is the object of knowledge. These are the 6 questions asked by Arjuna. And we will see the answers in the subsequent verses to these questions. The next slide. Oh, actually, move back. Hare Krishna. So now, what is explained about this 3rd and 4th question in the 2nd verse of this chapter? So Krishna says that this body is the shape. Why? Because a living entity is provided with a particular karma shape, a body to act upon. A body in which the living entity lies, he is different from that body. And he is given a particular field of activities in which he does various activities, because nobody can act without a body. So that body is the kshetram for every living entity. And we know that there are 84 lakh species of living entities. So, every body which a particular living entity gets has some limitations, some restrictions. For example, a bird can fly because it has been provided with that type of field, that type of body. But as human beings, we cannot fly. So every body which a living entity gets has its own restrictions and its own limitations. Okay, so and how one is gets that body, a particular body, it depends on our nature to lord, because our nature is to lord over material nature, and the capacity with which we can, to extent which we can lord the material nature, we have been providing a body. And we also want to enjoy our senses. We want to do sense gratification. And the capacity to enjoy that sense gratification, that is the criteria a body has been provided to a living entity by God. So that body becomes our field of activity. And now why field word has been used for body? Because we know that in a field, what we do, we sow crops, and then we sow seeds and we get crops. Similarly, while acting in this body, we are sowing seeds. We are doing some karmas. Okay, and these karmas will later on lead to some future results. We have to bear that results, and depending, we have already discussed this before, depending on our desires and depending on our karmas, we get our next body. A body has been awarded to us by Krishna to fulfill our desires, whichever we desire. And we know that when we leave this tendency of lording over material nature, when we understand that we are not the enjoyer, then only we can go back to Krishna and stop the cycle of birth, old age, disease and death. Now, the second thing is about Kshetragya. Krishna says that The Jiva who lives in this body is the Kshetra, is the knower of the field. How to understand this? We know that from the second chapter, we have learned the concept of soul. Okay. That we are soul and we are not this body. So we understand that we are different from this body. If we are wearing some clothes, we know that we are different from the clothes we are wearing. Similarly, we know that this material body is a covering for the soul. But what happens when we are put into this material world, we are identifying ourselves with the body and the things related to body. And that's why we are entrapped into this material world. That is the reason. The reason our desire to enjoy separate from Krishna has put us into this material world, and we are giving this material body to fulfill our desires through it. Now, regarding this, we know that I know about my body, what is going inside. If I have a fever, I can know about it. If I have some pain, I can know about it. And I also know that I am different from this body, because I have been seeing that I have grown up from boyhood to youth to old age. So I'm growing. I can see I'm the same person, but I can see that changes are occurring in my body. And through that, seeing that changes, I can analyze that there's something beyond this body. So I am the knower of this field of activity. So, and this can be explained further in the next verse, which is the third number verse. Next slide. Jnanam is perfect knowledge. Kshetragya chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetragyo jnanam yattaj jnanam matam. O Syan of Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Bhagavad Gita 13.3. So after explaining the concept of knower of the field and the field, now here Krishna is saying that understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. So here he is highlighting the concept of super soul. We know from a previous study in Bhagavad Gita that super soul always accompanies every living entity. So Krishna is seated in the heart of every living entity as super soul, and he is the knower of our body too. But there is a difference. There is a difference between our knowing our body and Krishna knowing our body, because Krishna is the super knower. He knows about all the bodies of all the living entities in this body, but we cannot know. So he is the Pradhan knower, super knower, because he remembers, like he's told to Arjuna that you don't remember your births, but I can remember your all the births. So Krishna has account of each one of us, of our every life, and not only of us, each and every living entity, whether it is in the body of a mosquito or a tiger or a bird. He knows about everybody, because he is, as super soul, is an expansion, plenary expansion of Krishna to accompany us. And we have known that as super soul, he even enters every atom. So he's always with us. So he knows about all the bodies. He, like a doctor, when you go to a doctor has to ask this. Doctor has to do some tests. Then only he can diagnose about a disease. He cannot know when we have fever or what problem we are suffering from. He has to undergo so many diagnoses, and then he is able to give treatment. But Krishna, because he is the knower of all bodies, he knows what each and everything is going in our body as well as in the other body. I cannot lift the hand of the other person, so, but because I'm restricted to my own body. But that is not the case with Krishna. And then Krishna is saying, and this can be explained with the concept of king's kingdom. Like in a king's kingdom, king know about the, he has divided his kingdom into various fields, and he has allotted one field to one farmer. So he has the knowledge of all the fields of all the farmers, but a particular farmer knows only about his own field. He doesn't know about the field of the other farmers. Similarly, we cannot know about the other person's pains and sufferings. And a person who understands this body, what is this body made up of, how it acts, How is it part of material nature? And its knower. And its knower now becomes two. There are two knowers of this Kshetra. So there are two Kshetrajñas, that are the two knowers. One Kshetrajña is we, the living entity, and the other Kshetrajña is Krishna. So, according to the third verse, we have already understood that there are two knowers, the soul and the super soul. And the fifth question was about Jnana. So, to know about body and its two knower is knowledge. And as well as to understand the relationship of soul with the super soul is also knowledge. So, we have till now studied the subject matter of the field of activity and the knower very minutely, which is the field of activity, body. And what are the two kinds of knowers? Super soul and the individual soul. And how Krishna is the knower? We already know that as super soul, he expands. Then he is not the individual knower of the body. He is the super knower. Then we know that sometimes there is a philosophy in which somebody says that soul and super soul are same. But there is a refutation of this theory in this. How? Because the total number of body, it indicates Krishna is present as super soul in every body, while the atomic soul is present only in their individual body. So there is a difference. So we should not misunderstand a rope to be a serpent. So similarly, we should not understand that soul and super soul are one and the same. So real knowledge is to know super soul in the controller of both. He is a super controller. He controls both the field of activity as well as the finite enjoyers, which are we, which are the living entities. So he's the controller of both Kshetra and Kshetrajña. And with the help of an example, we can understand this Prakriti, Purusha and Ishvara. In Prabhupada, in the purport, gives the analogy of a painting, painter and easel. We all know that in this analogy, painter is Krishna. And the easel, the canvas board on which painting is being made, is the material nature. And the painting is we, the living entity. But this is this is an approximate example, because in this example, there is no free will of the painting. But as far as we are concerned, we as living entity has free will also. But we can roughly understand with this analogy the difference between soul, super soul and the body. So in purport, Prabhupada also mentions that all these three are Brahman in a sense. Prakriti is also Brahman. Then we are also Brahman. Then the super soul is also Brahman. Because in Sanskrit, sometimes same word can be used in different contexts. It is related to context which we are speaking. So there are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities. Jiva is Brahman as trying to control the material nature. We want to load a lot of the material nature, and the control of both, that is super soul, is also Brahman. But we know that we call that as Per Brahman and ourselves as Brahman. So this is the explanation Prabhupada is given in the purport. And Chaitanya Charan Prabhu also explains this with an example. Suppose we are sitting in a movie hall and we are trying to see a movie. So we are focused on seeing that movie on that screen. We are not involved in that movie. But still, what happens when we are seeing the movie, we feel the emotions which are going on in that movie. If somebody is crying, we feel like crying. If somebody is happy, we feel like very happy. So we are sitting aloof. So we are the soul. We are different from the body, but we are at present identifying ourselves with the body. And that is the main cause of our suffering. We have dissociated ourselves from Krishna and identifying ourselves as the body. And that's why we are suffering in this material world. So we should always remember this example of a person watching a movie. And that movie is the body in which the different activities are going on, and they are affecting us. They are guiding us. They are dragging us towards some point, hell or heaven, like that. So this is the example. And now we move to the next slide, which is about the difference between the soul and super soul. Somebody can read. We have already discussed this.
I'll read Mataji. Soul, living entities are known as Jivatma. Infinitesimally small, Anu. Size of the soul is 1/10,000, the size of the tip of hair. Cognizant of one's own body, individual knower. Soul is secondary proprietor for one body. Analogy, citizen as the proprietor of one land. Soul is the secondary controller of senses. Analogy, citizens are the secondary controllers of activities. Fallible, a loving servitor, subordinate. Innumerable living entities. And supersoul description, God as maintainer is known as Paramatma, infinite, Vibhu, cognizant of everyone and everything, superknower. Supersoul is the supreme proprietor of all the bodies. Analogy is king is the proprietor of all lands. Supreme Lord is the supreme controller of the senses. Hane Kecha. Analogy, king is the original controller of all activities. Infallible. Eternally a loving master, superior. Though Supersoul is in the heart of every living entity and within every atom, still there is only one Supersoul. Support reference from Vedic literature.
Thank you, Rajesh. So this slide clearly indicates the difference between soul and Supersoul. So we have to understand that those who say that we will merge into Supersoul, we become one with Krishna. We have already understood that we have the qualities of Supersoul, but in quantity we are always Anu. We cannot be Vibhu. And that is the difference. That is the theory of simultaneous oneness as well as difference. Okay, we are qualitatively one, but quantitatively we are very, 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 very small. So this is the basic difference between soul and Supersoul, which we have already, I think so, discussed previously also. And we know that Krishna is Achyut. He doesn't fail in any circumstances, but we can. We are fallible. And we are always subordinate servant of Krishna. Krishna is a loving master. So we'll move to the next slide. Now, in this slide, this is the verse number 4. Now, Krishna says, Tat Kshetram yat yadrikcha yad vikari yataschya sajayo yat prabhavascha tat samasena me shrini. Now, please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activity is, and what his influences are. Bhagavad Gita 13.4. So, 6 things we can see in this verse, which will be answered in the subsequent verses as we go through the entire chapter. So, this is a summary slide. Like in this, it's asked yat cha, means what is the composition of this body, which will be explained in 13.6. Then what are the qualities of this body? Gun, yadrik, that will be 13.7. Then some changes that the body undergoes. Yad vikari, what are the vikars that the body undergoes? That will be partially mentioned in 7th and then 20th verse. Then how this body comes into picture, origin of the body, yatah, in 6th as well as in verses 21, 22 and 30. Then what is the swaroop of the knower of the body? That is about jiva, yat, discussed in 14 to 18 and 23rd verse. And there will be some powers of this knower. What is his prabhava? What are his influences? This knower, what he can influence upon, what is effect? It's explained in verses number 14 to 18. So this is a verse in which some questions or some things are described, which will be discussed later on the chapter. So we move to the 5th verse. Next slide. So Krishna is saying that knowledge of the field of activities and knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. So here Krishna is saying the knowledge which I am talking about, the knowledge of difference between soul, super soul, and their simultaneous oneness and difference is mentioned in various scriptures by various sages. So he is giving a reference of sadhu as well as shastra. Now we know that Krishna has established his own position as Supreme Personality of God. He is the highest authority. He has already said, this is my opinion. But now he is like a guru who wants to give us references from previous scriptures, previous authorities. And that's why he's saying that he gives evidence from other authorities like sages and scriptures to substantiate his words. So Krishna is in the role of guru. And that's why he's presenting corresponding references to Sadhu and Shastra. So he's teaching us that a guru should always take references from authorities. Though he being the highest authority, he's doing this to teach us a lesson. So we'll move on to the 6th verse. Okay. In the description of this shloka, Prabhupada has given a brief explanation from one Upanishad. So this is Taittiriya Upanishad. So from here, he has explained that there are 5 stages of Brahman realization. When we get this body, we are covered by some coverings. And so we can realize this Brahman in various degrees, at various levels. So there are 5 stages. Like first is Annamaya, then is Pranamaya, then is Gyanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. So we know that in the Annamaya stage, what happens? This is at the level of gross body. Okay, and here the living entity understands or realizes the Brahman in relation to food. He thinks everything is food. Okay, so his consciousness is limited to that extent. Like in a young newborn child, when a child is born, he always looks for food. Where is my food? He will take everything in his mouth because he thinks everything is food. So his consciousness is limited up to that extent only. So he realizes the supreme object of realization as food. So that is in the Annamaya stage. That is at gross level. Then when we go to higher level, then we start realizing the supreme absolute truth in the living symptoms or life forms. One seeks to preserve his life. Now he has a conception that I need to survive. So that survival thing or the need to exist comes in his being. So that is the Pranamaya stage. That is also at gross. Then the next stage is when he starts realizing that he starts thinking, willing, and feeling. So it comes to the subtle level now, from gross to subtle level. So subtle body is involved in that. So one can appreciate the subtle interactions of mind, intelligence, emotions here as ultimate object of realization. So he moves further ahead from gross to subtle. And in the Vijnanamaya stage, what happens? Now the living entity starts realizing at the level of soul. And realization with the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. He starts coming to know the difference between the subtle body, gross body, and himself, the soul. To realize the self as different from the field of activity, including the subtle body. That realization comes in that stage. And thus the soul itself becomes the ultimate object of realization at the Vijnanamaya stage. And the final stage is Anandamaya stage. In the Anandamaya stage, he starts realizing about the supreme object of realization, that is Krishna. So he realized the distinction between the soul and the super soul here. So that is the Anandamaya stage of realization. And we all know that when we realize Krishna, that is the most blissful form of realization of Brahman. So these are the various stages which are discussed in the purport of this verse number 5.
Mataji, the Jnanamaya is not at least understanding of theoretical understanding of the soul, or is just subtle body? Jnanamaya.
Gyanmaya.
Yeah.
Yes, at the level of Gyanmaya, he starts like this is a variation from like animals to human beings. Like animals have a consciousness only that need to survive. They will do anything only for their survival. Okay. So from animals, when we move to human form of life, so that is the Gyanmaya stage when the living entity starts thinking at the level of subtle things like thinking, willing, doing some activities, emotion and all. They are also to certain extent present in animals also, but they are higherly developed in human beings. So that differentiation is there in the Pranamaya and Jnanamaya stage. But yet the soul realization has still not present in the Jnanamaya stage. It starts with Vijnanamaya stage.
So at Jnanamaya stage, the living entity doesn't even understand that theoretically as a soul?
Yes, he's thinking at the level of his body only, subtle body.
Yeah, okay. So, but
from
why did we say it as Jnana then?
Different from mind, he's different from this living symptoms, that realization starts coming. That he is not this mind, he is not this intelligence, he's something different from the mind and intelligence. You want to say anything?
No, I'm asking is because it's called Jnana, I'm thinking that at least at this stage,
actually in
there'll
this
be some awareness
has been discussed in levels of Brahman realization going forwards. That's why I think so. It's not related directly to the word Gyan and Vigyan. Gyan is when maybe we have discussed before that Gyan is objective knowledge and Vigyan is realized knowledge.
Yes.
So in that sense, also we can take that.
Yeah, so Vijnana means realization of as a soul, right? At least.
Yes.
Yeah, but Jnana means at least there should be a knowledge of soul. Is that not true? That is what I based on words, I'm just trying to understand.
I think so. What is described here is that the first two stages, Annamaya and Pranamaya, they are stages. They are in entities at a level of gross body, right? Annamaya is an entity is totally focused towards acquiring food.
Yes.
It's something that's all, right? Not like the example of given of a child that, as soon as it gets anything, the child will sleep. Pranamaya is more like also trying to protect the body and all. So trying to protect the life in the body, ourselves. The body is the Pranamaya, the level of that is still, not advanced to the further level. The level advancement to the level from gross body to subtle body. Subtle body, the Gyan Way stage is said where the confusion I think so is arising from the word Gyan. But here it is described that stage takes you from, just someone who is at the stage of gross understanding and taking care of life, but thinking, willing, feeling, so trying to use the intelligence in kind of doing certain things. You remember, like subtle body is mind, intelligence,
and false ego.
So that at that level, if someone starts to work, so primarily human beings, right, who are more advanced. Almost all the living entities have that to a certain extent, but not very advanced. So then the person comes to that level of subtle body, utilizing the subtle body to its fullest. It's still at the subtle body. Okay? Then when they come to the Vijnanamaya stage, then they come to the stage of differentiating or advancing furthermore from the subtle body to the soul. That we all these things are described, that the distinguish between the gross, subtle, and the soul. Anandmaya further, when the soul establishes its relationship with super soul or Krishna.
That is clear, Prabhuji. Yeah.
That will become, blissful.
Is it also gradually going from temporary thing?
The question is this also gradually going temporary things? Right?
Yeah, basically from very temporary things to the eternity, like the permanent bliss, where we understand the presence of Paramatma and the supreme realization in the Anandamaya stage.
Yeah. maybe said so. Yeah. And here in this picture, they are described to be kind of coverings, 5 kind of different coverings on the soul. So we, as we penetrate through this understanding, we go and near to realizing our true nature and that relationship. So, Madhvi Radhika ji, should we move forward?
Yes. So this is the verse number 6 to 7. Now here Krishna has started describing the composition of the material body. And we are already discussing this in great detail in Bhagavatam 3rd canto, which is a part of Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya Yoga is the analysis of the matter, analysis of the 24 elements which matter is made up of, with which this body is made up of. So what Krishna is saying here, the 5 great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. So we'll move to the next slide. Okay, so next slide. So we all know these 24 elements, the 5 Mahabhutas, the 5 great elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether. Then the 5 object of senses, that is the form, sound, smell, taste and touch. Then the 5 knowledge acquiring senses and the 5 working senses, like the eye, ear, nose, tongue, skin, hands, legs, voice, anus and genitals. Then we know about mind. We know about intelligence and the false ego. And what is Pradhan? Pradhan is the unmanifested form of the 3 modes of material nature, avyaktam. So these are the 24 elements with which the body is made up of. This material world is made up of. Now the 7th verse says that when there is transformation of the field of activities, then we feel something like there are some interactions. Depending on the body, we will have some desire, we will have some hatred, we will be feeling happy or we will be feeling distressed. So these are the interactions of these field of activities because we are identifying ourselves with this material body. And there can be anything else like fear, fearlessness or something, determination. All these are all interaction of this field of activities. And in the left-hand side, we have discussed about what the changes which happens in this field of activities. Like it takes birth and it grows, it stays, then it produces offerings, and then it finally dwindles and the death. So these are the changes which any matter or any material body will undergo. So these are the vikars which happens in the material body. And these are the qualities of the body. Like this, we feel like something, dvanda there always. Whichever thing which we like gives us happiness. Whichever feel which we don't like us, we hate that thing. And the other 2 symptoms which are mentioned there are conviction and consciousness. So these convictions and consciousness represent the subtle body. They are the manifestation of the subtle body, that is mind, intelligence and ego. This is mentioned in this verse number 7 of this chapter. So moving on to the next slide. This is as discussed in the purport. Okay, so verse number 13.6 is explaining what the field of activity consists of, which we have already discussed, the 24 elements. And verse number 13.7 explains the transformations and the interactions of the field of activities. So what is the central theme of the purport? It indicates that the field of the body is a non-permanent material thing and kshetra or knower of the field is different from the field. So what are the components of the field of activities? The 24 elements. What are the interaction of the gross and subtle body? Gross body interactions are desire, hatred, happiness, distress. On the subtle body are the living symptoms, which is represented by consciousness and convictions. Then there is pradhan. So 5 great elements are of gross representation of the false ego, technically called as materialistic conception or tamasa buddhi, intelligence and ignorance, which represents the unmanifested three modes of material nature. So this Pradhan will be discussed in detail in the Bhagavatam section. This is here Krishna is only giving us just names and a brief description about the field of activities. And what is the basis of the knowledge? Authorities as per Bhagavad Gita 13.5 translations. So the knowledge about these field of activities, this Gyan, is based on the various authorities and various Vedic knowledges. It is just not concocted. It is based on something. And the 6 changes, we already know, it takes birth, grows, stays, it has byproducts, then it decays and death. So these are the basic concepts which are discussed in the purport of the verse number 6 to 7. So I think so with this, the last slide, this chapter, Hare Krishna. So any questions or comments?
So the verse number 13.6 is same as that sequence of Karana Srishti, right, Prabhuji? All the 24 gas elements.
Yes. So 13.6.
Yes. Pradhan, then Panchamahabhut.
Palsihu and Pradhan are the 4, while the 20 are 5 gross elements, the sense objects, that kind of senses, knowledge acquiring senses and working senses.
Yeah. So in that verse, that Avyakta is the Pradhan. The meaning of Avyakta is Pradhan.
Avyakta means because the modes are not still manifest.
Inactive. Modes are inactive.
Any other question or clarification? So thanks for joining. We'll end the session now. Hare Krishna. This is more of a technical knowledge. So request all of you to please read the purports in the chapter in advance. Then you will be able to acquire more and understand. 13 chapters, specifically, the last 6 chapters will have few concepts. And, if you read them carefully, it will help you to better understand. Thanks all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.